Welcome back. You're still watching a World Insight edition coming to you from Beijing. I'm Tian Wei. 2019 is a milestone for relations between China and Italy, the 15th anniversary of a comprehensive strategic partnership, while 2020 is the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties. China is Italy's largest trading partner in Asia, and Italy is China's fifth largest in the European Union. Last month, Chinese President Xi Jinping paid a state visit to Italy on his first overseas trip this year. Italy signed the Memorandum of Understanding for Cooperation on the Belt and Road Initiative during President Xi's visit, the first G7 member to join the BRI. The deal steps up cooperation on the economy, trade, investment, energy, agriculture, and culture sectors. Earlier, I talked to Michele Geraci, the Undersecretary of the Italian Ministry of Economic Development. Take a listen about how he describes the latest situation. Mr. Minister, what a pleasure to see you in Boao.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to see you too.
My question really has a lot to do with the China-Italian trade and economic ties. Chinese President Xi Jinping just made a trip there. 29 documents being signed. What can we expect near term?
I think we should expect an improvement in the trade terms between Italy and China, more export and more investment, but also not just the number, but better quality.
What kind of better quality are you talking about?
For example, Italy and China have complementary skills, and we would like Chinese companies to invest in Italy in those areas where Italy has been maybe lagging behind. Transport, infrastructure, we have discussed before, airlines, investment, and of course China has a lot of experience in development of high-speed rail here in China, infrastructure, ports. We're looking at the possibility of Italy becoming one of the points of arrival of the Silk Road. That's what we signed the BRI memorandum for. And we know that there are some Chinese companies interested. We did two small agreements with two northern ports in Trieste and Genoa, but this is only the beginning.
Two ports. How is it likely to be done when it comes to win-win cooperation?
I think it's a win-win because China, by making some inroads, some investment into the ports, of course, would then have its interest in directing some of the traffic from the shipping lines into those ports. And so we have double benefits because there is indeed an inflow of money, inflow of money that can be used to expand the capacity of the port, to allow for more containers, and then once this capacity is ready, this is in itself creates jobs and increases the GDP of the area. Then once the capacity is increased, more traffic would go in, and of course more traffic would generate further activity.
Right. How is this compared to, let's just say, the earlier case study between China and the Greek port?
At Greek ports, the ownership structure will be slightly different because in Italy we cannot right out sell ports, we can give concession. The Chinese investment in Greek port in Piraeus was a purchase of two piers that were already existing. In the case of Italy, we're actually looking at attracting Chinese investment to build new piers. Piers that do not exist.
How much investment are we looking at, and what is the timeline you're talking about here? Because implementation is very important, as you may know.
Absolutely. For port investment, we're looking in the range of a few hundred million euros. So
that will be in a time frame of? A
couple of years.
Meaning during this administration?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
What about some of the other areas that you mentioned? For example, building infrastructure. Now, China does have a good technology when it comes to trains and many others. But what exactly are you talking about in those memorandums?
Memorandums do not have specific deals, so it's a framework that lists all potential areas where the two countries can cooperate. So it has transportations, infrastructure, telecommunications. So it's a list of names of sectors where we can cooperate. One specific that we were looking at is airline cooperation. You know, the Italian airline is seeking for foreign investment. There are some interested parties, and we were exploring opportunities and interests on the Chinese side. This would be a direct investment, minority, of course, investment into directly the Italian airline. A minority also because legally, within European rules, non-EU investors can only have a minority stake.
Right.
Again, small investment.
Yes. Mr. Minister, as the Chinese president was visiting Italy and the two sides were coming up with all of these achievements, there are different views going on in the European capitals, as you may know very well. You were also being accused by some by too much closer to China in some media reports. But Mr. Minister, what do you make of this very diversified opinions about how to cooperate and what to cooperate with China among the European capitals?
I think in Europe there is a mix of interest in cooperating with China and fear, and I think some of the criticism was mostly based on the fear element. Are we opening up to China? Are we letting Chinese company to sweep all our assets? And of course this is not the case. As I mentioned the example, we do not want to sell existing. I made the example of port infrastructure. Yes. We do not want, we want investment into new capacity. We do not want to sell existing assets. So the fear of Chinese company buying all our infrastructure was not well founded. So this accusation, I think, must have been based on the misunderstanding of what we were trying to do. And of course, as a minister for Italian government, my job is to do the interest of Italian people, like every government does. But I also understand other European countries were criticizing our stepping closer to China because every time China does deal with one country, it's fewer deals with the other countries.
Really? Is that true? I thought the pie is getting bigger.
The pie gets bigger, but if the shipping from China ends up in Italian ports, they do not end up in, in French ports. So there is a competition, at least in the short term. The pie can get bigger, but in the meantime, we, of course, compete with each other.
How do you look at those opposition personally?
I don't mind, because every time we start the discussion, you know, there's two types of criticism. There's criticism by, let's say, maybe people who do not want to hear reasons, and those we just leave them behind. We don't. But people who really want to understand and engage, little by little, they are understanding. I'll give you an example. European countries have criticized us, but Miss Merkel in Germany, after reading the content, actually mentioned that there is nothing critical. People were criticizing us for maybe having letting a Chinese company into our market. After reading it, they realized that the government, there is no obligation to do that. One very strong criticism was that Italy could fall into the debt trap. And do
you think?
No, the reply is a G7. That was the paradox. Many of the criticisms were in a way not consistent internally, because they were saying Italy is the first G7 country that signs, and there is a danger of a debt trap. And the answer is, to me, very obvious. Just because it's a G7 country, there is no danger of debt trap.
But what about the danger of the debt trap? Is there any for Italy?
No, debt trap happens for small countries when foreign investment makes up 10, 15, 20% of the GDP. But just being a big economy, 1.7 trillion euros, Italian economy, investing 500 million, 1 billion, 2 billion doesn't in any way get closer to a debt trap. Italy gets at least every year 20 billion of foreign direct investment. And even 20 divided by 1.7 trillion is very little. So the amount of money that we're talking on Chinese investment coming to Italy is really minimal. So there is no debt trap problem. This is the inconsistency. So all criticisms were in a way internally not consistent.
How do you see the European capitals, as many as there are, will be able to come to any consensus about what the French Prime Minister, what the French President earlier indicated as a coordinated approach toward China? Is there any chance?
We do have coordinated policies. So a European Union have the same import and export tariffs with regards to China, and on that we cooperate with the other 27 members and we have common trade policy. That's one leg of the relationship. The second leg is promotion. Promotion is individual. Every country can promote their own product, they can sell, they can entertain conversation on pushing each other's products. So common policy, but individual promotion. And so that's when the competition steps in. Just a few days ago, President Xi was in France, and of course they purchased and they made commercial agreement with France, whose president was at the same time calling for better and more in cooperation. But of course, and rightly so, he was making commercial deals with China, like every country should do, independently from each other.
So how do you see this very interesting mixture or picture, isn't it, Mr. Minister? On the one hand, there is the rhetorical fear and the rhetorical accusation, but on the other hand, a lot of pragmatic deals are being done on the table, in front of the world.
Indeed. So, in a way, we brush off the critics with the counter-argument. The numbers speak for themselves. Italy exports to China only 13 billion euros, France, the UK, 19, Germany, 87. N times what Italy does. So investment from China into Italy has also been very limited, with only 3,000 jobs being created over the last 20 years by Chinese investment into Italy. And this is the mirror of Italy having lost time in its positioning vis-à-vis China. The other European countries have done business with China. The Silk Road exists. In Duisburg, Germany, there's a train that goes from Germany, Duisburg, to Chongqing. China has invested in all European ports, in France, Spain, England, Belgium, Holland, of course Greece, and not in Italian ports, with one very small exception. So when people say, oh, Italy is stepping forward too close to China, all the other countries already do a lot more business with China, and they've already sold many of their own assets.
So you just brush it off.
We discuss, and no, we don't just say this, but we explain. We say, what is it that we're doing more than others? And you know, in Europe.
And what's wrong if you're doing more than others?
There's nothing wrong. It's good to be leader. So Italy wants to be a leader, and maybe this is what they are surprised about. For the first time, Italy is taking a leading role in Europe to engage with China. The content of the MOU that we signed actually has concepts that are very close to the European standards.
Give me an example.
Transparency, level playing field, and also reference to climate change, very important, that were not contained in previous agreements. So we actually did something that is now available for other European countries, if they wish to use as a template for their own MOUs. So we, in a way, engage China, and in the interest of China too, raise the standard of the language of the MOU itself.
Right, and earlier when you and I were on the same panel at the Boao Forum, you give a surprising answer when it comes to the question as to who else is on the line to work together with China on the Belt and Road Initiative, even come close to signing a memorandum. You said there are two in the pipeline.
Yeah, I expect more countries to sign, because you know what, we already have 13 countries in Europe that have signed.
Yeah.
So Italy is the first bigger country, but we are not alone. I also like to remind that all the 28 countries in Europe have already signed and put capital in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is linked somehow to the Belt and Road, of course, infrastructure project. And so we already hear that other countries are looking with interest, and my forecast is that more countries will sign up. Once
your forecast must have some kinds of evidence as the foundation. So what kind of evidence are you trying to present to us right now about the potential?
It's more feeling that over the last few days, the criticism have slowed down once the content of the MOU has been made public, which makes me think that the criticism was based on the assumption that maybe there was something inside that was worrying them. Now they saw it. I said, you know, Germany made a statement that there is nothing critical about it. And France, just this morning, President Macron said that they wish to engage with China more in cooperation with Africa in infrastructure projects. So the language of the other European leaders is slowly getting more closer to thinking, oh, maybe this MOU that Italy signed is not such a bad thing.
Right. One question is very obvious. As we're experiencing dramatic changes going on in the world. You live in China a couple of years.
10 years.
You also travel, 10 years,
10
oh my
years.
God. You also traveled extensively around the world. Now, what's likely to shape our choices for the future?
We talk a lot about different cultures, different goals. I do believe that people around the world have the same goal. They want to wake up in the morning, close to people that they love, eat safe food, send children to school, get a job, come back and be at peace, first with themselves and then with the circle of friends and family around. And in that respect, I think we all share this common goal, which may be achieved by different means. The search for money may be one driver that preoccupies people, but I do believe, and I did say yesterday, ethics, morality, but mainly in being at peace with themselves should be at the basis of everyone's behavior.
Before we wrap up, I do want to borrow a quote coming from Marco Polo, who came to China hundreds of years ago, about that good life you just described. He said, the beauty of an arch starts from the single stone.
Indeed.
I guess they are very philosophical in history, isn't it?
True.
We better learn from them. Thank you so much,
Mr.
Geraci, for coming over to our studio here in
Pleasure
Boao.
to be here. Thank you very much.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's our talk with Michele Geraci, the Undersecretary of Economic Development from Italy, talking about the recent negotiations and talks between China and Italy regarding Belt and Road Initiative. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Inside CGTN into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. Also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Inside team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for more insights across China and around the world. Good night.